She was a buff bombshell who liked to walk on the wild side.
She had a stripper pole right in the middle of her bedroom.
That'll definitely get any man's attention.
She apparently had an assortment of male friends that she dealt with.
But when her biggest fan is gunned down in the dead of the night, police find themselves in the middle of a scintillating mystery.
He was found face down, shot in the back.
No one knows who killed him.
I was in shock. I could not believe that somebody would just be murdered like that.
As police search for answers, a disturbing picture begins to emerge.
They indulge in drugs and cocaine and marijuana, then sex.
He'd called her 86 times in 4 hours.
This case is filled with carnal pleasures. Lust, greed, wrath. You name one of the 7 deadly sins, and this case seemed to have it covered.
It's like with every turn, there was a new revelation.
If you dabble on the dark side long enough, you're eventually going to pay the price.
Homicides occur normally because of sex, drugs, or money. The majority of homicides are one of those 3 things. So it's our job to determine which.
October 7th, 2009. It's early morning at the Brandon Glen apartment complex in Conyers, Georgia. James and Susan Kane are in a deep sleep when a loud noise jolts them awake.
What's that?
It's gunshots.
I said, I'll go check it out. When I look out the window, I see a shadow getting into the blue SUV, and then I see it back up and burn rubber. So I go back and I tell my wife, and she said, let's call 911.
Yes, this is Susan Kane at Brandon Glen Apartments. I think my husband and I have heard gunshots.
I started to get this really terrified feeling. Are gunshots going to come through our windows and hit us in our beds? You know, I started to get really scared.
I'm gonna take a look around.
I'm gonna go with you. Hold on.
As James and Susan make their way outside, they stumble upon a horrible sight.
We walked around the corner, and then we saw a body lying there in the grass.
Oh my God.
We were just kind of in shock. You start realizing that something terrible has just happened.
The Kanes keep their distance until the police arrive, but from their vantage point, it appears the man is dead.
Looked like it was a young black male, and it just made me feel like crying. It made me very sad.
As detectives search for answers, they'll find themselves in a maelstrom of sex, drugs, and all manner of depravity. And at the center of this storm is one woman who may hold the key to everything.
There's one thing certain, and it's this. Without Sunday, none of this would have happened.
Born in 1987, Sunday Harper grew up in the Atlanta suburb of Conyers, Georgia.
We're a close, tight-knit town, one of these counties where everybody kind of knew everybody.
Sunday had a very traditional upbringing. She went to school, she had a lot of friends. She did what normal teenage girls would do.
But by the time this buxom young woman turned 18, she was turning more than a few heads in her neighborhood. And by all accounts, Sunday seemed to love the attention.
I wouldn't dress the way that she dressed. It was pretty tight clothing. It was pretty revealing in her appearance, you know, as far as that goes.
The women in Conyers may have found Sunday's wardrobe to be a little on the tawdry side, but most of the men in Conyers thought Sunday had it going on. Chief among them was 32-year-old Clarence Coco Edwards.
Damn, girl. How you doing?
I'm good.
Think I can take you out sometime?
Sure, I like that.
She had a thing for bad boys, and Coco certainly fit the bill. He had been in and out of prison, but she still fell for him pretty hard.
I'll see you soon, baby.
I think Sunday thought of Coco as the love of her life. They had some serious chemistry going on. The sex between them was intense. There's no denying that there was a deeper connection on Sunday's part.
Less than a year after they first started hooking up, Coco and Sunday welcomed their first child into the world.
They ultimately had 2 kids together, a boy and a girl, and Sunday was pretty young.
Sunday and Coco seemed to have found happiness. But in 2009, their young family was torn apart when Coco again found himself on the wrong side of the law.
Obviously, this put a lot of strain on their relationship. Here she is, a young mom with 2 kids, and now they're taking a break.
Though her heart was still with Coco, The burden of being a single mother had Sunday searching for a sense of security.
She had dated a few men, but nothing really seemed to work out.
She seemed to still be carrying a torch for Coco, even though he was behind bars. He was still sort of her knight in shining armor.
After spending nearly 4 years of his life in prison, Coco was released in 2009. He and Sunday immediately rekindled their romance.
Coco was released from prison. Now he was getting back into her life.
It was like they never missed a beat.
It was clear that these two were meant to be together. Despite their setbacks and their time apart, they still felt a love connection.
Sunday was ecstatic. She finally had her man back.
He was great with the kids, he treated her well, and in the bedroom, let's just say they made up for lost time.
She went so far as to install a stripper pole in her bedroom, and she would perform dances, and this would be a part of their sexual foreplay.
Sunday definitely had a wild side, and she wasn't afraid to do anything she needed to do to keep her man happy.
But if Sunday thought she and Coco's best days were ahead of them, she was dead wrong.
He had just got released from prison and soon after was gunned down and killed.
In the midst of her relationship with Coco, Coco's gunned down on the street. He's walking down the street coming back from the store, and he's just gunned down on a sidewalk.
It was very suspicious. Our job as investigators is finding the truth as to what happened to the victim, but nothing was found.
They really didn't have anything to go on. There was no evidence. All they had was theories and suspicions about who would want him dead. The only thing they were looking at is maybe his past had come back to haunt him.
Sunday was devastated. The love of her life had just gotten out of jail, and here he was, dead just a few weeks later.
Alone again and with 2 small children to feed, Sunday struggled to get by. Eventually, she landed a job at an adult boutique.
It was an adult novelty store where you can buy different kind of adult sexual type toys and videos.
To work there, you definitely have to have an open mind, be a little bit more free-spirited. I mean, it is an adult entertainment sex store, so you're gonna have to be able to deal with all types of people. And you yourself is gonna have to have a little bit of an attraction to that too. So she probably ran into all different types of people, especially people who were really interested into the little bit of freakier side of life.
Shortly after Sunday began working at the novelty shop, a man named Stuart Tabb walked into the store.
Hi, can I help you with something?
Yeah, maybe you can.
Doesn't sound like you're from here.
I'm not, but I'm liking it more and more every minute.
Okay, well, where are you from?
He's from the Bronx, New York. He had the nickname of B, which was indicative of being from the Bronx, I guess.
He moved down in about 2007 to get away from sort of the hustle and bustle of New York, to be in a more peaceful place and a safer place, and Conyers, Georgia offered that. And so he was really looking forward to a better future.
The people who knew him said that he was a phenomenal guy, a very nice guy.
He drove a nice BMW. He lived in a great neighborhood.
He was the anti-Coco. Coco was rough around the edges, and Stuart was polished and well put together. For the first time in her life, Sunday finally found herself attracted to someone other than Coco.
After exchanging numbers, it wasn't long before Sunday and Stuart started hooking up.
I think it was about sex.
So what are we doing tonight?
Actually, I thought we'd stay in.
Fine by me.
Sunday didn't seem like she had a main boyfriend. It seems like she had relationships with a bunch of different people.
The relationship that they had was not exclusive. She, I believe, met up multiple times with Stuart Tabb at her apartment.
Just like Sunday's relationship with Coco, nothing was off the table sexually with Stuart. In fact, just like with Coco, her relationship really transformed from being purely physical into more of a deeper intimacy.
But what Sunday Harper didn't realize was that history was about to repeat itself in the most brutal way imaginable. It begins just after 4 a.m. on October 7th, 2009.
I got called about 4:15 in the morning and was informed by our 911 operators that we had a person shot that was unresponsive in Brandon Glen Apartments. I was on call, and I responded to the scene.
The 911 calls were that they heard 3 to 4 shots fired.
Police found a man lying face down in the grass, shot multiple times. When they checked his ID, it was Stuart Tabb.
Here's this young mother who had had the wonderful opportunity to fall in love twice, And yet, both were so brutally murdered. This is doubly tragic.
But detectives would learn there was more to Stuart Tabb's death than meets the eye, and more to this mystery man from New York than anyone could imagine.
I think everyone was a little stunned when the facts started to come out in this case.
It was really getting out of control. They were genuinely shocked to find out that he was involved in that type of lifestyle.
Conyers, Georgia resident Sunday Harper was trying to move on after the devastating murder of her soulmate, Coco Edwards. But when a suave New Yorker named Stuart Tabb walked into the adult boutique where Sunday worked, she found herself unexpectedly smitten.
She was coming off of a tough relationship, the death of the love of her life. She wasn't even really looking for love, but they met, they hit it off, and one thing led to another.
But just as Sunday and Stuart's relationship begins to blossom, tragedy strikes.
It was just after 4 a.m. on October 7, 2009. This couple found Stuart lying face down with multiple gunshots at an apartment complex in Conyers, Georgia.
I was in shock. I could not believe that someone would just kill someone like that.
After police identified Stuart's body, they then became aware that he didn't live there, and they had to figure out how he got there.
At this point, we didn't really begin to know what a motive would have been and why he was there at that time of the morning.
The neighbors that called us in, where are they?
Yes, sir. We put them right over there.
Okay.
Speaking with James and Susan Kane, police uncover their first set of clues.
One of the residents in the building where the shooting took place, he was sleeping with his windows up, heard the gunshots. He didn't see anything, but he saw a darkened colored SUV speed away from the scene.
What type of SUV was it?
I didn't see him.
It's too dark.
We just felt like whoever drove that car had something to do with this murder.
You've been very helpful.
Thank you.
Patrol officers issue an APB for the mystery vehicle.
115, I need to issue a BOLO on a dark SUV.
In the meantime, detectives begin processing the crime scene.
When they found Stuart Tabb, he was lying supine in the grass behind the apartment complex. He was shot 3 times, once in the shoulder, twice in the back. One of the interesting things is this, there were no shell casings found at the scene, which I guess leads police officers to conclude that it was a revolver that was used.
The grass was wet. We could see the footprints from where Mr. Tabb fled from the front sidewalk of the building. So we were certain that the confrontation took place just at the bottom of the stairs of the breezeway where the sidewalk meets the parking lot.
While investigators take photographs of the shoe impressions and collect soil samples, they soon make another discovery. Not far from Stuart's body, detectives find not 1, but 2 handguns.
I've got a gun.
Mr. Tabb had a weapon he dropped at the initial contact point, and there was also a weapon under him in the grass beside the building.
Authorities don't know what to make of the gun. Was this the gun that was used to shoot him? Did someone panic and drop the gun? Or was he using the gun in self-defense?
Given the location of the crime, police believe Stuart might have been the target of a botched robbery.
The shooting and the murder happened at a place where other incidents have happened before.
We were very familiar with the complex. We were getting periodic calls of gunshots or shootings and the crime in that area.
When we first moved into that apartment complex, it was actually really nice, but the area itself started going through some transitions and changes.
But detectives soon realize there's one problem with that theory.
Even though that area of town was a little sketchy, the police's theory of a robbery just didn't quite add up. He had all the money in his wallet and his BMW was still in the parking lot.
As detectives dig through Stuart's pockets, they unearth something even more telling.
He had cocaine and marijuana on his person.
So at that point, he had drugs on him. We're assuming could it have been over drugs? Possibly. Was it a robbery? No.
This is a known drug area, and normally the calls that we were getting on shootings resulted from drug activity. So in their mind, they're thinking it's another shooting involving drug activity.
Detectives also find something else, Stuart's cell phone.
It's showing the missed call stored as Starship.
So detectives are wondering who is Starship and why is Starship calling him around the time he was murdered. This was something like off the show of Law and Order.
Well, as we talked to the other investigator and we were going over the phone, he said,
Detective,
Yes.
I stopped a girl coming out of the apartments just around the corner earlier tonight. She had a shirt on, said Starship, said she was on her way to work.
According to the officer, he saw the woman leave the apartment complex just minutes after the shooting.
Have you heard anything unusual, loud noise, anything out of the ordinary?
No.
The police stopped to speak with her, and it's uncertain as to whether or not she knows a shooting has taken place, but she seems to be in quite a hurry to get out of there.
she said she was going to work, and the female that was with her was there to take her to work. He didn't, at that point, retrieve her name. He just questioned them, asked them if they saw anything, and let them go.
Police think it's just too coincidental that there was a woman leaving the apartment complex with a Starship shirt on. And there's also a phone number named Starship.
So just who was this mystery woman? And what type of business is Starship? One of the officers on duty seems to know.
I think that's an adult store in town.
Officers run a search on a number in Stuart Tabb's phone listed as Starship. But the number isn't that of the adult boutique.
So at that point, we started looking into who the number was registered to, and that's how we came up with Sunday.
Not only is the telephone number that of Sunday, but the billing address attached to that number is the apartment complex where Stewart was shot. That's because Sunday lived at that apartment complex.
Police discovered Sunday and Stewart were in a sexual relationship. She definitely was a person of interest.
Especially once you consider this was the second lover of Sunday's to be shot dead in less than 3 months. Police immediately seek out Sunday for questioning.
Yes?
We need to ask you some questions about Stuart Tabb.
Okay.
Did you know he was murdered last night outside your apartment building?
What? No.
She does show some sense of shock and surprise when they reveal to her that Stewart's been shot.
What is going on? I had a boyfriend murdered just 2 months ago.
What was his name?
Coco. He was shot too.
Do you have any idea what might have happened last night?
I don't know what to tell you. This is the first I've heard of this.
We understand that you two were in a relationship. Was Mr. Tabb in your apartment last night?
Yes. He was there. He was there a lot.
What Sunday tells detectives next gives the case an unexpected twist. One that might unlock the mystery behind this deadly shooting.
Sunday told us that they had carried on a relationship of some sort. According to her, Stuart Tabb is her drug dealer.
Stewart and Sunday did not have a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It seemed like she was just sleeping with him to get drugs.
It's been less than 24 hours since 30-year-old Stuart Tabb was found brutally shot to death outside his lover Sunday Harper's apartment in Conyers, Georgia.
During this investigation, we found out that approximately 2 months prior to Mr. Tabb being murdered, that Sunday was involved with a man named Coco in downtown Atlanta. And apparently, it was a similar situation. I believe Coco was shot with a shotgun and killed on a sidewalk in a drive-by. And 2 months later, you have Mr. Tabb gunned down.
Now, just hours after the shooting, Sunday has revealed to police that their relationship was more than romantic, and Stuart Tabb was much more than the suave businessman he purported to be.
Stuart Tabb was a local drug dealer in the area. Apparently, he was supplying drugs to her in exchange for sexual favor.
We got high together. He's the weed man.
According to Sunday, Coco's unexpected death less than 3 months earlier had torn a gaping hole in her heart. To fill the void, she turned to Stuart for everything.
Sunday was grieving the death of her children's father, so it's not uncommon when people are dealing with grief that they engage in some acting out behavior, such as being promiscuous, using drugs. And when you're using drugs, it has a huge effect on the brain.
She was in a dark place. She needed a shoulder to lean on. And she turned to sex, drugs, and that comforted her during that time. And Stuart was able to provide her with all of that.
It makes you wonder what Sunday was going through. Her baby's father had just died 2 months before, and now her lover had died. I wonder where she was mentally. Was she stable? How was she responding? Usually when people are dealing with grief, they act out. And maybe her doing drugs, having sex with multiple lovers was her way of grieving.
So you procured drugs on a regular basis for Mr. Tabb?
Yes.
Did you have anything to do with his death?
Absolutely not. I mean, we were seeing each other, you know? I cared about him.
Do you know of anyone who might have wanted to harm him?
Not really, no.
We'll be in touch.
Sunday's claim that Stewart allegedly sold drugs gives police ample reason to look into his background.
Cops are thinking, hey, this could be the lead we're looking for. So let's check out the victim's backstory.
Stewart Tabb had no criminal history here in Rockdale County, but he did have a criminal history out of New York.
He had an assortment of narcotic convictions, cocaine, marijuana, most of them related to distribution.
Apparently, Stewart Tabb had a history of selling drugs back in New York. When they found his body, he had drugs on him. So now police are speculating, had he run out of luck in New York and decided to open up shop in Georgia?
We found no employment history on him. We had no indication that he had any other job.
Stewart Tabb literally had zero employment history, either in New York or in Georgia. Yet he lived a relatively lavish lifestyle. Nice cars, nice clothes, nice everything. Stewart had all the telltale signs of being a drug dealer, so his death very well could have been drug-related.
Detectives work their sources on the street, but they're unable to uncover any evidence linking Stewart Tabb to the local drug trade. And when they visit the address listed on Stewart's Georgia driver's license, the mystery only deepens.
We went to his home, and it was a nice home, nice subdivision.
How can I help you guys?
It was not the kind of residence you'd associate with a drug dealer.
Can you confirm that this is the residence of Stewart Tabb?
He's my husband.
It turns out that Stewart Tabb was actually a married man.
My name is Jennifer Tabb. We met in high school.
They had been married for a couple of years at that point. They knew each other from when they were teenagers, when they were young.
I'm sorry to have to inform you, but your husband was murdered last night.
She didn't fall apart. It was almost like it wasn't a surprise to her.
Now, if I'm a cop, I'm thinking, this is pretty interesting. Is she reacting this way because she was there when it happened?
She seemed saddened, but not like you would expect. I mean, when you do enough of these, you see a pattern of reaction. And her pattern of reaction was not normal.
Jennifer Tabb's reserved demeanor gets police thinking. Could she have something to do with his murder?
When police find out that Stewart is married, they begin to suspect his wife.
Were you aware that he was not at home last night?
No, I wasn't. Stewart gets phone calls in the middle of the night, and he ups and leaves.
His wife tells us that he goes out all the time. You know, and I even made the comment to her, does he go out at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning all the time? She said, yeah, it's not uncommon. I thought that was a little strange.
Did you have anything to do with your husband's death?
Stewart wasn't perfect, but I cared for him.
I think she knew he cheated, but that he was the provider and that she had no way to provide for herself, so she just accepted it.
Miss Tabb, where were you last night?
I was here.
Can anyone verify that?
Of course.
She has an airtight alibi. She's been at home all night with her children, and she has no idea why he would be at that apartment complex.
Do you know anybody by the name of Sunday?
No, I don't.
She didn't know Sunday. She didn't even realize that they were having an affair. So that leaves her with little motive to commit that crime. So Stewart's wife is cleared as a suspect, which raises more questions than it does answers.
Where did Stewart Tabb's money come from? What did he do for a living? Was he really a big-time drug dealer? And were people on the streets protecting him?
With so many questions left to be answered, detectives once again turn to the other woman in Stewart Tabb's life, Sunday Harper.
You never know what may have happened between the two of them. Given the fact that Sunday had another boyfriend who was brutally murdered, she could not be ruled out at this point.
As police prepare to speak with Sunday again, little did they know that events were already in motion that would turn the entire case upside down. Police in Conyers, Georgia are working overtime to solve the brutal shooting death of Stewart Tabb. According to his lover, Sunday Harper, Stewart supplied her with more than just a little TLC.
She claimed that he was her drug dealer and that his death maybe was drug-related.
Sunday's story makes sense on the surface, but police have yet to corroborate it.
Although he had a criminal record for selling drugs in New York, there's no concrete evidence that he was selling drugs in Georgia. So with no knowledge of what he was doing at that apartment complex at 4 in the morning, solving this case is going to prove difficult.
With their investigation at a standstill, detectives decide to speak to Sunday Harper again.
Sunday had been very cooperative up to this point, but she lived in the same apartment complex where Stewart's body was found. Her phone number was one of the last numbers called from his phone. And on top of that, her last boyfriend, Coco, was also killed under similar circumstances.
Coco being murdered 2 months prior to the death of Stewart Tabb was suspicious.
Detectives bring Sunday in for questioning and ask her to pace them through the night of the murder. According to Sunday, on the evening of October 6, 2009, she called Stewart around 7 p.m., just 9 hours before he was killed.
It's a possibility that she called him just to get sex, or it's a possibility that she called him to get the drugs she needed.
It was like, so what's up for the night? He was like, I'm in a trap, you know, I'll leave the trap till like after 11, he said, and I'll be over there. And I was like,
What's the trap?
Trap, like where they sell dope.
According to Sunday, Stewart showed up at her apartment shortly after midnight.
He indulged in drugs and cocaine and marijuana.
We was drinking, went to my room, we turned on a movie. I have a dancing pole too. So I was on the dancing pole, we was smoking weed. So, you know, we was high, we was getting geeked up, whatever. And we was just drinking and, you know, we had sex.
After they engaged in some sexual activity, Stewart got a call and had to leave her apartment.
And he answered one call before he left, and he said, he didn't say much, he said, all right, whatever. And then he was like, I gotta go.
Sunday claims that Stewart left around 3:45 a.m., at which point she took a shower and left for work shortly after.
When he leaves, Sunday goes into the shower. And sometime while she's in the shower, there is some encounter outside the apartment.
Because they located 2 guns at the crime scene near Stewart Tabb's body, detectives asked Sunday if she ever saw him with any kind of weapon.
She described the guns that Stewart typically carried, and since they both sounded like the guns found at the scene, police thought they belonged to Stewart and not the killer.
At that point, there's nothing to indicate that Sunday's lying. But when they start asking her about her past relationships, that's when things start to get interesting.
They started asking her about Coco, her previous boyfriend. She had then just offhandedly mentioned another guy that she had been seeing right before she met Stewart.
And she gave us the name Jakari Carter.
According to Sunday, her relationship with Jakari began while she and lover number 1, Coco Edwards, were on a break.
He began to date her on an ongoing basis, to the extent that most of their acquaintances, at least on Sunday's side, knew Jakari as Sunday's boyfriend.
Jakari held down a job as a waiter in his mother's restaurant. He had known Sunday for a long time and was genuinely in love with her. But Sunday made it clear that her heart still belonged to Coco. And when Coco shows up dead, Jakari uses that opportunity to slide back in. That is until Stewart Tabb enters the picture.
And that's the point Sunday broke things off with Jakari for good. But according to Sunday, Jakari didn't take it too well.
Here's this young man, a little naive perhaps. He's not a playboy, he's not flashy. He meets Sunday, who is a little flashy, who has a stripper pole in her house and really knows how to turn on a man. You can see how a young man like Jakari would fall hard and fast for a woman like Sunday.
Jakari just kept calling her after they broke up for good, and he would even show up at her apartment unannounced.
It wasn't unusual for us at times to hear someone, you know, a lot of yelling down there, a lot of banging on doors.
When's the last time you possibly talked to him?
He was calling all night.
You get the impression that Jakari knows that there must be other relationships involved. He must have some sense of who's with her.
So he kept calling, he was like, you don't love me. And I said, well, what are you doing? He just kept acting it.
You have Jakari Carter, who is a boyfriend who she broke up with, is calling her excessively, more than a normal person would at that time of the night. Sunday was at home with another male. Jakari was a strong person of interest at this point.
What's he drive?
He be in a gold, it's like a 2008 little Sea Breeze car, 2-door car. And then sometimes he be in his mother SUV.
What color is that?
Blue.
We find out that Jakari Carter drives a dark blue SUV that was registered, I believe, to his mother. That night, witnesses reported seeing a dark-colored SUV leaving the scene.
Detectives are increasingly convinced that Jakari Carter is responsible for the murder of Stuart Tabb. But Sunday tells them that's simply not possible.
Jakari wouldn't do nothing like that. You don't think? At all. But it's so weird.
Witnesses saw a blue SUV leaving the scene.
But he was talking to me. Oh, Jesus.
While Sunday comes to grips with the possibility that Jakari might have murdered Stuart Tabb in a jealous rage, police begin an all-out search for their new prime suspect.
There's just one problem. Jakari is nowhere to be found. He's not at his house. He's not at his mother's restaurant. He's nowhere.
Trying to find this guy was not going to be easy, but detectives were prepared to pull out all the stops.
Less than 48 hours after the discovery of Stuart Tabb's bullet-ridden body, detectives in Conyers, Georgia have a suspect in their crosshairs. According to Stuart's lover, Sunday Harper, her ex-boyfriend Jakari Carter had been calling her obsessively throughout the night.
Mr. Carter had been calling just repeatedly over and over and over all night long. So at that point, we figure we have a jealous boyfriend.
Police are anxious to speak with Jakari, but there's one small problem. No one knows where to locate him.
We needed to find him. We began searching for any known systems to find Jakari Carter's address.
Police looked for Jakari, but he wasn't in Conyers. He wasn't communicating with friends and family. For all intents and purposes, he had vanished into thin air.
With the clock ticking, police in Conyers tracked down an address for Jakari.
We ended up in downtown Atlanta at Bixby Court Apartments.
When they got there, they saw a blue SUV, just like the one witnesses described. They were pretty sure they were in the right spot.
Do you know who owns that SUV right there?
I don't know him. I just know he just moved in a couple of days ago. Matter of fact, there you go right there.
Jakari Carter! He began to breathe heavily. He didn't ever ask why we were there to speak to him or find him.
Is that your SUV?
Yeah.
We have some questions for you. We'd like to have you come down to the station.
Okay, can I get my mom to come with me?
Not knowing for sure if he was a person who actually committed the crime, we decided to go ahead and accommodate that. So his mother came to the scene and drove him to the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office, where we conducted an interview with him.
Jakari, where were you on the night of October 7th?
I was with a friend.
Jakari said the night of the homicide, he was at his house and then went to his buddy's house in an apartment complex in Atlanta. After leaving, he went back home. He stated that he was not in Conyers that night.
Did you see Sunday at all that evening?
No, I never went by her place. What is that's what she's telling you? I went home. You can ask my mom.
He was adamant that he wasn't there. He didn't commit the crime. He stated that his mother would confirm his alibi. So I went and confronted his mother to see if she would, but his mother would not confirm his alibi for him. Miss Carter stated that he's not a killer, but Sunday would play games with his mind.
His mother even told us he was obsessed with Sunday and that he must have snapped, but she wasn't going to be a part of it.
Police have Jakari's mom all but admitting that Jakari was crazy about Sunday. She was an honest woman, a stand-up woman, a woman that Jakari respected immensely.
They walked Jakari's mom back into the interrogation room with Jakari, and then they leave and watch them interact through a two-way mirror.
Mom, you have to tell him I was at home.
I love you, son, but I can't do it. I have to tell the truth.
The conversation between Jakari and his mother gives detectives enough to hold him on, and the probable cause they need to search the Carter family residence.
We executed a search warrant at Jakari's residence in hopes of finding a murder weapon. We searched the entire apartment that Jakari was found in the night before, and we never did recover the murder weapon.
Detectives have no luck finding a gun, but they do discover something else.
They didn't find some shell casings. It's not direct evidence, but it's circumstantial evidence that he could have owned a weapon.
They also found a pair of sneakers they were able to tie to the murder scene.
On the date that this incident occurred, it was raining, and where the body was found, there were footprints. And those prints allegedly matched the prints or kinds of tennis shoes that he was wearing.
Jakari's cell phone records may also provide another critical clue.
While searching Jakari's phone records that night, we had came across a phone number that was being called prior to the homicide. We had linked it to a female who identified herself as knowing Mr. Carter.
The woman is identified as Latrice Butler, and Latrice is more than willing to talk.
She was cooperative with us.
How do you know Mr. Carter?
We've actually been dating for about 2.5 years now.
It was like, wow, Jakari actually had two love interests, Latrice and Sunday. So it didn't really jive with the whole jealous lovers angle.
That's not the only bombshell Latrice drops. She claims she was actually with Jakari on the night of the murder.
I was actually with him all night. We checked into a motel.
She said that he had came and picked her up about 12 o'clock and taken her to a hotel where she was with him drinking, and they had sex.
You said you got there at midnight. What time did you leave?
6 a.m. together.
That's 2 hours after Stewart's murder, so police have got to be thinking maybe Jakari has an alibi after all.
You said you left at 6 a.m. Is there any chance that Mr. Jakari Carter could have left any time during the night?
I believe so, but I did fall asleep first, so if he ended up leaving, I wouldn't have noticed.
She couldn't say and actually say that he was in the hotel room the whole night with her because she said that she went to sleep.
So now there's a chance that Jakari actually slipped out of the motel room and drove to Sunday's apartment while she was still sleeping.
Detectives know there's only one way to confirm this hunch.
We went to the motel and spoke to the manager there who provided us access to the video system.
As detectives screen the hotel surveillance video, they spot Jakari's car pulling into the motel parking lot at 12:21 a.m.
And then we did discover video of him leaving the hotel somewhere around 2 o'clock.
So now he's leaving the motel and he's constantly calling Sunday's phone while he's driving to her place.
Cell phone tower strike records showed him leaving downtown Atlanta and coming straight to Conyers. And the cell phone towers that started hitting off, it was within a half mile of Sunday's apartment.
Detectives now believe they have their man. But when they confront Jakari with this evidence, will he come clean? Less than 72 hours after the shooting death of Stuart Tabb, police in Conyers, Georgia believe they've solved the case. A mountain of evidence, including cell phone records, puts 24-year-old Jakari Carter at the scene of the crime.
The cell tower strikes were showing from the Atlanta area all the way to the incident location during close proximities to the homicide. And then right after the homicide and the 911 call, he's continuously calling Sunday.
We got all these phone records back. You know, Carter's called this girl 86 times in 4 hours. I mean, that's obsessive.
Anybody who's going to call your phone that many times trying to figure out where you are and who you're with, that's very possessive and controlling. That would be the sign of someone who could possibly snap.
Armed with this evidence, detectives press Jakari for a confession.
We have the cell phone records that show you were there.
I'm telling you, that wasn't me. How many times do I have to tell you that?
He became very aggressive, very loud.
We have the video surveillance from the hotel
Yeah, what you
tonight.
have? That wasn't me.
We have the shell
I keep telling you, that
casings
wasn't
at your
me.
home.
It was not me. I don't care.
What about the phone
I
records?
don't care about no
what
phone
about
record.
the phone
I'm
records?
telling you, that wasn't me.
His whole demeanor changed from being cooperative to uncooperative. I believe at this point he knew that we knew he was there.
He was clearly agitated. He started yelling back at Investigator Pilgrim, which doesn't happen a lot in an interview. And so at that point, I intervened, and he decided that he didn't want to talk anymore. He was placed under arrest that night. Once the interview was concluded with Investigator Pilgrim, he was placed in custody.
Jakari Carter's main motive, in my opinion, would be that this was a simple case of obsession with one individual female, which was Sunday.
This was a case of, that's my girl. She's not yours. You need to stay away from her. You disrespected me. And a lot of times, some people become very territorial of their partners, and which can result in some violence.
Based on Sunday's previous statement to police, authorities believe that on the early morning of October 7th, Jakari had repeatedly called Sunday's phone demanding to know her whereabouts.
Where you at?
Sunday told Jakari that she was at her mom's house.
But obviously that's a lie. That night, she's at her apartment hooking up with Stuart Tabb.
But Jakari apparently called Sunday's bluff.
Jakari didn't take what she had said for face value. Jakari, according to Sunday, was saying, "I'm over here at your mom's house, come out the door." She says that she hung up on him.
Minutes later, detectives believe Sunday called Jakari back.
He said, "I see your car outside, come outside." She knew then that he might have been outside of her apartment complex.
And we believe that because Jakari had been calling so much that night, that she was afraid to leave the apartment.
Hey, man, where you coming from, man? You coming from Sunny's house, man? I see you up there, man. Man, leave a girl alone, man.
There was some encounter between Jakari and Stuart outside the apartment. What actually happens between the two of them is relatively unclear. What we do know ultimately is that Stuart ends up with 1 shot to the shoulder and 2 shots to the back.
It's a solid theory backed by a mountain of circumstantial evidence, and the case against Jakari is further strengthened by his lack of a credible alibi.
He was wanting his mother to lie for him, to say he was at home. He kept saying to her, "Please tell them I was at home." And she said, "You know, I'm not gonna do that."
But is it enough to put Jakari behind bars for good?
The prosecution had phone records, witness statements, and motive, but the defense still felt confident.
First of all, the state didn't have a choir boy victim. You had a victim who was the local drug dealer. So would the jury have any sympathy for him? Or would the jury kind of think, you know, maybe he got what he ultimately deserved?
Jakari's attorney also had something prosecutors didn't have. Sunday was cooperating with the defense.
She was willing to testify on his behalf, that he was a violent person, that he had shown no signs of violence towards her. It was clear from my discussions with Sunday that she still had feelings for Jakari Carter and wanted to help him in any way that she could.
With Sunday's help for the defense, it wasn't going to be an easy case for the prosecution.
We can show you circumstances of the cell phone tower pings, of the cell phone records, of the statements of Sunday, but there was no eyewitness, there was no direct evidence linking him directly to the shooting.
The DA's office offers Jakari a deal. If he's tried and convicted, he's looking at a life sentence. So does he roll the dice and go to trial and hope that the jury finds him innocent? Or does he take the deal, which is a reduced sentence?
Then it became a question of whether or not Jakari wanted to accept.
On February 18th, 2011, inside a Rockdale County Superior Courtroom, Jakari Carter announces his decision.
He took a plea deal. He was sentenced to 25 years to serve 15.
His family believed that it was something that they would rather him admit to and to a lesser charge than have to go through the whole process of the trial.
For detectives, the news is bittersweet. On one hand, Stuart Tabb's killer is off the street. But without a trial, the case remains shrouded in mystery.
There are still 2 unknowns. 1, what was Stuart Tabb's occupation? Was he a drug dealer or not? And 2, was Jakari responsible for the death of Coco, Sunday's soulmate and father of her children?
I found that to be highly coincidental, that here's 2 people in 2 months that Sunday's been involved with, and Jakari Carter's the common denominator in all this. We've proven here that he kills Tabb. What's to make us think he didn't kill Coco too? All the information was gathered, and I contacted the Atlanta Police Department, turned it over to their detectives. Where it went after that, I don't know.
But a lot of times when people get in relationships, they present themselves as healthier than they are, which would probably be a reason why Sunday ignored a lot of the warning signs that she saw in him, like his possessiveness, his jealousy.
What does it take for a person to make the step that he's going to take the life of another human being? And in this instance, I mean, jealousy, love, uncontrollable passion. Either you have the ability to control that or you don't.
Sunday was everything a young man wanted in a woman, so much that men were willing to kill for her.